I'm 44 years old, and this is the first time I've ever tried to put this story into words. I'm doing it here because anonymity feels like the only way I can be honest. In my real life, I'm expected to be composed, rational, successful. The kind of man people assume has everything figured out. On paper, I did. I built a company that took off faster than I ever imagined. I became a millionaire before 40. My wife and I lived in a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood where nothing bad was supposed to happen. She was pregnant with our first child, and everyone kept telling me how lucky I was. I nodded, smiled, played my role. For a long time, life felt predictable in a comforting way. My wife and I weren't wildly passionate anymore, but we were steady. We knew each other's routines, habits, silences. We didn't fight much. We didn't talk deeply either. I told myself that was just what long marriages became. When she got pregnant, everything subtly shifted. Her world narrowed to doctor's appointments, exhaustion, and the baby growing inside her. I tried to be supportive, but if I'm honest, I felt like I was slowly being pushed to the edges of my own life. I didn't resent her. I resented how invisible I suddenly felt. That was when we hired a housekeeper. It was supposed to make things easier for my wife. Someone to help around the house while she focused on resting. A practical decision. Nothing more. Her name was Anna. At first, she was just part of the background. Someone who moved quietly through our home while I worked or took calls. I didn't notice when that changed. I only know that one day, normal stopped feeling normal, and I didn't question it nearly enough. Anna was in her early 30s, maybe a little younger. I never asked at first. She was efficient, polite, almost invisible in the way good housekeepers often are. She showed up twice a week, always on time, always respectful. My wife liked her because she was gentle and didn't make her feel useless for not being able to do everything herself anymore. I liked her because she listened. It started with small talk. Harmless things. She asked how my day was going while wiping down the counter. I answered without thinking, complaining about a meeting or a delayed deal. Most people nod when I talk about work. Anna actually asked follow-up questions. She remembered names. She laughed at the right moments. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was just starved for conversation that wasn't about baby names or nursery colors. Still, I noticed how quiet the house felt when she left. How I caught myself looking at the calendar to see when she'd be back. I began working from home more on the days she came. That should have been my first real warning sign. I framed it as convenience, but deep down, I knew I wanted to be there. There were moments that lingered too long. Passing each other in the hallway. Our hands brushing when she handed me a mug. Eye contact that lasted a second longer than necessary. Nothing inappropriate ever happened, and yet everything felt charged. At night, lying next to my wife, I replayed conversations I'd had with Anna. I hated myself for it. I'd turn over, put a hand on my wife's stomach, feel the baby move, and promise myself I'd shut this down. The problem was, I didn't know how to shut down something I'd never fully admitted was happening. The emotional line blurred before I ever crossed the physical one, and that's something I still struggle to explain to myself. There was no dramatic moment where I decided to betray my wife. It was more like erosion. A slow wearing away of boundaries I thought were solid. Anna started staying a little later some days. She'd say she wanted to finish everything so my wife wouldn't feel stressed. I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. We'd talk while she worked, our voices low, like we were sharing secrets even when we weren't. She told me about her life in pieces. She'd moved here alone. Her last relationship had ended badly. She talked about how hard it was to feel invisible in other people's homes, to clean up traces of lives that weren't hers. I listened. I told her she wasn't invisible to me, then immediately felt a jolt of panic after the words left my mouth. My wife noticed changes in me before I did. She asked why I was distracted. Why I was on my phone so much. I blamed work. That answer had always worked before. One afternoon, Anna mentioned she was thinking of taking classes, maybe changing careers. I offered to help without thinking. Connections. Advice. Resources. The look on her face, gratitude mixed with something else, stuck with me. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I told myself I was just being kind, that I'd always helped people. But I knew this felt different. More personal. More dangerous. The guilt crept in quietly. I started avoiding my wife's eyes when Anna's name came up. I felt like I was carrying a secret that hadn't fully formed yet, but already weighed too much. I still believed I could stop it. I still believed I was in control. I was wrong. The first moment I felt real fear wasn't when something happened between us. It was when I realized how much I was hiding. Anna texted me once to ask about a cleaning product. A normal, practical question. I answered, then kept my phone face down on the table like it had burned me. My wife noticed. She didn't say anything, but the look stayed with me. After that, I started deleting messages. Not because they were inappropriate, but because I didn't want to explain them. That should have told me everything I needed to know. My wife asked one evening if I felt distant. She was sitting on the couch, one hand absently rubbing her stomach, the other holding a glass of water. She looked tired. Vulnerable. I told her she was imagining it. I kissed her forehead and went to take a call in my office. I hated myself for how easily the lie came. Anna and I never named what was happening, but we both felt it. The air between us was thick. Conversations drifted into silence more often. We stood too close. When our eyes met, neither of us looked away first anymore. One afternoon, she laughed at something I said and touched my arm. It was brief. Innocent to anyone watching. I felt it like an electric shock. I pulled back. I told her we needed to keep things professional. She apologized immediately, eyes down, cheeks flushed. I thought that would be the end of it. Instead, I couldn't stop thinking about that touch. That night, I dreamed about her. I woke up sick with guilt, my wife asleep beside me. I went to the bathroom and stared at my reflection, trying to recognize the man looking back. I told myself I just needed distance. Less interaction. Clearer boundaries. But distance is hard when the person you're trying to avoid is inside your home, quietly becoming the one thing you can't stop thinking about. I tried to regain control by doing what I always did when things felt messy, throwing money and structure at the problem. I told myself I'd stop working from home on the days Anna came. I scheduled meetings. Left early. Came back late. For a short while, it helped. Then my wife started having complications. Nothing dramatic at first, just more appointments, more fatigue. She needed help getting around the house. She needed rest. She needed me there. So I stayed home again, telling myself this time it was for the right reasons. Anna noticed the change in my behavior immediately. She asked if she'd done something wrong. The concern in her voice made my chest tighten. I said no. I said I was just busy. Another half-truth added to the pile. One afternoon, my wife went to lie down, exhausted after a long morning. The house fell quiet. Anna was folding laundry in the living room. I sat at the table, pretending to work, acutely aware of every sound she made. She broke the silence by saying, "You've been distant." I laughed awkwardly and said she was imagining it. The same words I'd used on my wife. That realization made me feel hollow. Anna looked at me for a long moment, then said, "I don't want to cause problems." That sentence cracked something open in me. I told her she wasn't causing anything. That she was important. I didn't say how. I didn't need to. The look in her eyes told me she understood exactly what I meant. We didn't touch. We didn't confess anything. But when my wife woke up and called my name from the bedroom, the guilt hit me so hard I had to step outside to breathe. I knew then that this wasn't just emotional confusion anymore. It was a choice I was actively making, even if I refused to say it out loud. The real shift happened quietly, without any dramatic declaration. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Ordinary. Forgettable, except it wasn't. My wife had left for a long prenatal appointment that ran late. Anna was finishing up, moving more slowly than usual. The house felt suspended in time, like we were the only two people left in it. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen and said, almost casually, "I think I should start looking for another job." My heart started racing before my brain caught up. I asked why, even though I already knew the answer. She hesitated, then said, "Because this isn't healthy." I told her she was right. I told her I understood. And then I said the one thing I shouldn't have said. "I don't want you to go." She looked at me like I'd just said something irreversible. Maybe I had. We talked. Really talked. No pretending. No euphemisms. She admitted she'd been trying to ignore her feelings for weeks. That she felt ashamed. That she hated herself for wanting someone who wasn't available. I told her I felt the same, that I hadn't slept properly in months, that I felt like I was splitting in two. When she cried, I reached for her. Instinctively. My hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. That was the first time I touched her on purpose. It didn't go further than an embrace, but it didn't need to. The line had been crossed completely. We stood there holding each other, aware of how wrong and how right it felt at the same time. When my wife came home, I kissed her hello. I helped her to the couch. I asked about the appointment. I played my role perfectly. Inside, something had already broken, and I knew there was no way back to the man I was before. After that day, everything felt different, even though nothing on the surface had changed. Anna still came twice a week. I was still a husband. My wife was still pregnant. But now there was an unspoken truth hanging in every room we shared. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't need to. The way she looked at me had changed. The way I looked at her definitely had. Every interaction felt loaded, like one wrong word would cause everything to collapse. I started dreading my wife's presence and hating myself for it. She deserved my full attention, my loyalty, my patience. Instead, my mind kept drifting. I caught myself comparing them, which made me feel even worse. My wife represented responsibility, history, obligation. Anna represented escape, understanding, a version of myself that felt alive again. One morning, my wife asked if I was happy. The question came out of nowhere. She was standing in the kitchen, holding her belly, watching me make coffee. I froze. I said yes too quickly. She nodded but didn't look convinced. That same afternoon, Anna asked me the same question. I didn't answer. I just stared at the floor. She said softly, "You don't have to explain." That nearly broke me. We began stealing moments. Not physical ones at first. Just conversations in low voices. Sitting across from each other, saying things we couldn't say to anyone else. About fear. About regret. About how either of us planned for this. I told her my wife was pregnant, as if she didn't already know. She said she thought about that every day. That she cried in her car sometimes before coming inside. Hearing that didn't push me away. It pulled me closer. By the time I realized how deep I was in, it no longer felt like something I could simply walk away from. It felt like a second life growing quietly alongside my real one, waiting to be discovered. The secret didn't explode all at once. It leaked. My wife started asking small questions. Why Anna stayed later some days. Why I seemed tense on cleaning days. Why I was suddenly so protective of privacy with my phone. I answered calmly, confidently, the way I answer investors. That scared me more than anything, how practiced I'd become at lying. The moment everything shifted was stupid and small. I was in the shower when my phone buzzed on the counter. I heard it through the water, a sharp, insistent sound. When I got out, there were 3 missed messages from Anna. Nothing romantic. Just panic. "I shouldn't have said that earlier. I'm sorry. Please don't be mad." My wife was sitting on the bed when I picked up the phone. She didn't see the messages, but she saw my face change. "What's wrong?" she asked. I said nothing. And that silence told her more than any confession could have. Later that night, she asked me directly if there was someone else. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands did. I told her no. I don't know why I said it. Fear. Cowardice. Reflex. The lie sat between us like a third person in the room. She didn't push. She just turned away and went to sleep, leaving me wide awake with my thoughts and my guilt. The next day, Anna barely spoke. She moved through the house like a ghost. When she left, she didn't say goodbye. I realized then that I wasn't just betraying my wife. I was betraying everyone, including myself. I wanted to stop. I wanted to undo everything. But wanting something and actually doing it are very different things. And I was already too deep to pretend otherwise. The lie didn't hold for long. They never do. 2 nights later, my wife woke me up around 2 a.m. The room was dark, but I could hear it in her breathing, controlled, tight, like she'd been crying for a while and finally decided to stop. She said my name once. Not angry. Not soft either. Just final. "I know you lied to me." My stomach dropped. I sat up, already sweating. I asked what she meant, even though I knew exactly what she meant. She told me she checked my phone while I was in the shower earlier that evening. She said she hated herself for doing it, but she did it anyway. She didn't find explicit messages. That almost made it worse. "What is this?" she asked. "Why does she sound scared of losing you?" I tried to explain it away. Poorly. I said Anna was emotional. That she misunderstood things. That I was just being supportive. My wife looked at me for a long time, then said, "I'm pregnant, not stupid." That was when something in me gave up. I told her the truth. Not all of it. But enough. I told her I had feelings. That it hadn't been physical. That I didn't know how it happened. I kept saying, "I'm sorry," like it was a shield. She started crying then. Loud, broken sobs that came from somewhere deep. She kept asking why. What she did wrong. If she wasn't enough anymore. I told her it wasn't her. I meant it. She didn't believe me. At one point she said, "I'm carrying your child, and you fell in love with someone else in our house." I had no response to that. None that didn't make me sound like the villain I was becoming. That night, she slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, realizing that everything I'd been trying to protect was already gone. The next morning felt unreal, like I'd woken up inside someone else's consequences. The house was silent. My wife had left early for her mother's place without saying goodbye. Her side of the bed was cold. The absence was louder than any argument we'd had the night before. Anna was scheduled to come that day. I debated canceling. I stared at my phone for a long time, thinking maybe this was the moment I could finally do the right thing. End it. Clean break. Damage control. But instead of texting her not to come, I waited. When she arrived, she knew immediately. She took one look at my face and said, "She knows." I nodded. That was all it took. She sat down at the kitchen table like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. She kept saying she was sorry. Over and over. Like that word could rewind time. I told her my wife was pregnant. She already knew, but hearing it out loud changed something. Her face crumpled. She said she never wanted to hurt anyone. She said she'd leave, no matter what. The panic that rose in me surprised even myself. I told her I didn't want her to disappear. That I couldn't pretend she didn't matter. The words came out before I could stop them. She asked me what I wanted. That question terrified me. I said I didn't know. I said my wife didn't deserve this. I said I felt like I was destroying everything I touched. Anna listened quietly, then said something that still echoes in my head. "I don't want to be your mistake," she said. "But I can't be your secret either. After she left, I sat alone in the house, surrounded by evidence of a life I'd fractured. Ultrasound photos on the fridge. A half-painted nursery. A marriage hanging by a thread. I realized then that there was no option left that didn't hurt someone. And the worst part was knowing I was the one who made it that way. My wife didn't come home for 3 days. Those were the longest days of my life. I barely ate. I barely slept. I walked from room to room like I was inspecting the ruins after a disaster I'd caused but didn't know how to clean up. When she finally agreed to talk, it was at her mother's house. Neutral ground. She sat across from me on the couch, arms folded over her stomach like she was protecting the baby from me. She asked me one question first. Do you love her? I hesitated. That hesitation was my answer. She closed her eyes and nodded slowly, like she was bracing herself for a physical blow. She said she had suspected it wasn't just emotional confusion, that something deeper had taken hold. Hearing it confirmed seemed to drain whatever strength she had left. She asked if I planned to leave her. I told her I didn't know. I hated myself for saying it, but lying again felt worse. She laughed then, a short, hollow sound, and said, You're already gone. You just haven't moved your things yet. We talked for hours. She cried. I cried. She accused me of choosing excitement over responsibility. I told her it wasn't that simple, and immediately knew how pathetic that sounded. Nothing I said could make this better. She told me she couldn't live in a house where another woman had fallen in love with her husband. She said every corner would feel contaminated. That word stuck with me. When I left, she didn't hug me. She didn't tell me she loved me. She just said, I need space to protect myself and this child. Driving home, alone, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't sure who I was without the life I was actively losing. And I wasn't sure who I'd become if I chose the life waiting on the other side. I moved into a furnished apartment a week later. It was temporary, sterile, nothing like home. That was the point. I told myself I needed distance to think, to breathe, to decide. In reality, I was hiding from the damage I'd done. Anna and I didn't see each other for a while. We texted occasionally, carefully, like we were handling something fragile that might shatter if we pressed too hard. She asked about my wife. About the baby. I answered honestly, which felt strange after weeks of half-truths. One night she asked if we could meet. Just to talk. I almost said no. I should have said no. Instead I said yes. We met at a quiet cafe far from my neighborhood. She looked tired. Different. Like the version of her I knew had been stripped down to something rawer. She told me she'd quit. That she couldn't keep working in other people's homes, pretending nothing had changed. I felt responsible in a way that went beyond guilt. I'd altered the trajectory of her life, not just my own. She asked me again what I wanted. No tears this time. No drama. Just a need for clarity. I told her I loved her. Saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. Liberating and horrifying at the same time. She didn't smile. She just nodded and said she loved me too, but love wasn't enough to erase reality. She asked if I was ready to be the man everyone would judge. The man who left his pregnant wife. The man whose money wouldn't buy forgiveness. I didn't answer right away. Because for the first time, I understood that choosing her didn't just mean losing my marriage. It meant becoming someone I wasn't sure I could live with. The pressure didn't come all at once. It came in waves. Lawyers' emails. Messages from my wife about logistics, medical appointments, finances. Short, clipped, painfully polite. Every interaction reminded me that this wasn't just emotional fallout. It was real life, rearranging itself without my consent. My wife and I started talking about separation in practical terms. Not reconciliation. Not forgiveness. Just how to survive this without destroying each other completely. She told me she didn't hate me. That somehow hurt more than if she had. She said she felt numb, like something inside her had shut down to protect the baby. I started going to therapy. I sat on a couch once a week and tried to explain how I could love two women and still feel completely empty. The therapist didn't give me answers. She just asked uncomfortable questions I couldn't dodge. Anna stayed at a distance, even though I knew she wanted more clarity. She refused to move in with me. She said she wouldn't be my transition plan. I respected her for that, even as it scared me. Loving her didn't suddenly make me brave or decisive. If anything, it exposed how afraid I really was. People started noticing my absence. Friends asked questions I deflected. My parents sensed something was wrong but didn't push. I felt like I was living half a life, showing up where necessary, disappearing everywhere else. One night, alone in the apartment, I realized I missed my wife's presence in ways that had nothing to do with romance. The shared history. The familiarity. The version of myself that existed only with her. That realization didn't make me stop loving Anna. It just made the choice feel heavier. I understood then that no matter what I chose next, I would carry regret with me. The only question left was which regret I could survive. The baby came early. I was in my apartment when my phone rang at 4:17 a.m. My wife's name on the screen still made my chest tighten. She didn't say hello. She said, "I'm in labor." Like it was a fact, not an invitation. I drove to the hospital in a fog, rehearsing what kind of man I needed to be in that moment. Not the confused one. Not the guilty one. Just the father. Seeing her in that bed broke something open in me. She looked so small. So focused. So alone. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears and she said, "Don't make this harder than it already is." So I stayed. I held her hand. I coached her breathing. For those hours, nothing else existed. No Anna. No lawyers. No choices. Just pain and life and something being born despite everything. When our child cried for the first time, I cried too. Uncontrollably. I felt awe and shame collide in my chest. How could something so pure come from something so broken? Afterward, when the room quieted, my wife looked at me and said, "This doesn't fix us." I nodded. I hadn't expected it to. Anna knew where I was. She didn't text. She didn't call. She gave me space I hadn't earned. When I finally went back to the apartment days later, I sat on the floor and stared at nothing for a long time. I realized then that becoming a father didn't clarify my feelings. It only sharpened the consequences. Because now, every choice I made wouldn't just define me. It would define the story my child grows up with. It's been 6 months since the baby was born. My wife and I are officially separated now. Not hostile. Not warm. Just careful. We communicate about our child with the precision of people handling something fragile and irreplaceable. We sit on opposite sides of rooms. We don't talk about us. Whatever we were ended quietly, without closure, like a sentence that never found its period. Anna is still in my life. Not in the way people imagine when they hear a story like this. There was no dramatic reunion, no triumphant. We chose love. We move slowly. Cautiously. She refuses to live off my money. She insists on building something real, or nothing at all. Some days she looks at me like she's still deciding whether I'm worth the cost. I don't blame her. There are nights I lie awake in my apartment and replay everything, wondering where I could have stopped. Which moment mattered most? The first lie. The first secret. The first time I chose comfort over honesty. I don't get to rewrite it. I only get to live with it. Being a father has changed me, but not in the redemptive way people like to talk about. It's made me more aware of my failures. More afraid of repeating them. I hold my child and think about the story they'll one day hear, even if no one ever says it out loud. I don't know if Anna and I will last. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive myself. What I do know is this: love doesn't erase responsibility, and silence doesn't protect anyone. If there's a lesson here, it's not a clean one. It's messy and unresolved. Just like me. I live with that. Every day.